What about Dale Coyne Racing DCR? Where do you see them at?
Ferrucci here. I think when you'll see Ferrucci do damage is during the month of May. I'm very curious to see what Alex Palou is all about. I've heard David Land, my colleague Frank Linker at the Indy Sports Car Podcast. Missy Linker has also thought highly of this guy, and I want to see if that belief turns true or not. I'm not saying that he's going to be a breakthrough guy like Wickens was a couple of years ago or Rosenquist was last year, but if he makes a Fire So Fast 6, I don't think I'd be surprised either.
Matthew, we start the farewell tour, if you will, of Tony Kanaan, TK, with AJ Foyt Racing. First of all, AJ Foyt Racing going into St. Pete, and the begin of the farewell tour, or the farewell season for Tony Kanaan. What are your thoughts?
Actually, it does not start this weekend. Actually, next weekend. Bourdais will be in the 14. My only question, because he's mainly doing the ovals, etc. So we're waiting until May before we see TK. But like I said, they made some adjustments in the technical department with Foyt. Some new men are in there. So I'll be very curious to see where guys like Kimball and Bourdais end up next weekend. But, yeah, we're still waiting till May and the month of May itself before we start talking Tony Kanaan at this point.
Ed Carpenter Racing. Give us a preview of Ed Carpenter Racing.
Again, I think we're waiting till May unless something comes about where Connor Daly has a good run or Ryan SVK has a good run this weekend in the next few rounds at Barber, Long Beach, etc. But I think you'll see this team again be a challenger. That's why they were high up in the bracketology list promoted last week. I think you look at those teams and you look at those scenarios, and I think this is not the place where you expect them to do their damage. I think they will at Indy. But who knows? Maybe there's extra motivation there for Connor Daly to possibly go into a full-time ride, possibly, if not with DCR or somewhere else in 2021. And getting off to a good start this season would certainly help that cause.
Chip Ganassi Racing with the Iceman, Scott Dixon. Give us a preview going into St. Pete of Chip Ganassi Racing.
Well, I think right now the question is it going to be about the Iceman or is it going to be about Rosenquist? I think Rosenquist now with the one under his belt, I think he could be possibly a 1A to Dixon. And like I said, I don't know how many more years left in the tank Dixon has. I mean, what is he, like 38, 39 now, I think?
He's up there. I don't know exactly how old he is, to be honest with you.
Is how will Marcus Ericsson fit into the equation? I think Marcus Ericsson showed some positive things with Arrow McLaren last year. What was Schmidt-Peterson technically? How does he fare with the better car? Does he make a big jump? So I think the question is, although I expect Dixon will have a decent weekend next week, I think the question is how will Rosenquist and Ericsson play in, and will they, be challengers for the front of the field?
Rahal Letterman Racing, obviously Graham Rahal's team with his father and David Letterman, but Rahal Letterman Langen Racing, what are your thoughts?
Remember a few years ago when Graham Rahal was the best thing since sliced bread on road courses? I mean, he finished second at the IndyCar Grand Prix. They need to refine that thing where they are competitive on road courses because that was their calling card. They've been okay on the ovals, Sato, aggressive enough to get him up there. But beyond that, the fight from Graham Rahal needs to be found quickly. Now, granted, I don't think being the son of Bobby Rahal, he's going to get fired or anything. But at the same time, though, Bobby has made it clear no favors at the same time either, where, it's his seat to maintain. I mean, he had to earn the seat to begin with. He wasn't just given it like it was like for A.J. Foyt at Foyt or Marco Andretti and Andretti. He had to earn that seat before he actually got there. Because remember, he started with Newman Haas and then jumped over to Fisher Hartman before he eventually did end up with Rahal. So, I think there's going to be no punches held up here. I think Graham's going to need to start finding the magic here in 2020. I mean, granted, I don't think he's in any kind of danger of losing his seat or his Sato at this point, but it's not necessarily a perfect scenario right now because this team is not where I would say, a contender at a track other than possibly the Indy 500 or Sauber can get going. And, of course, that would have to be with the lesser of the two engines in the Honda power plant. So this is the team, I think, if you talk about teams that need to raise their profile on road courses in a big way, Ray Hall Letterman is right along the list among the Honda camp. If you're going to put a team like, say, Ed Carpenter at the top of the list in the Chevrolet camp for trying to improve the road course program.
You mentioned Andretti. What are our thoughts with Michael and company going into 2020, St. Pete and the Indianapolis 500?
They're running too many cars. That's the thing in my book right now, because they're going to be running 5 full-time, plus they're going to be running Hinch at 3 events, the 2 Indy events, and then Texas. You have to have a massive amount of personnel, but keep in mind that this is not just an IndyCar program for Andretti. He still has a lot of resources overseas with Formula E. So it's not just one thing out there for Andretti. And then, of course, with Raleigh Krause gets back going, he's probably going to enter another Raleigh Krause team. So you just wonder with all those entities, when does it become too much and the things and the dominoes start toppling over? And hopefully it's not this year, because I don't want people to think that, well, it's Hinchcliffe's ride, it's the fault of the team. But you wonder if the numbers are going to start getting too excessive for them, where they can't be competitive because they're trying to stretch the resources too far. Now, I think if that's the case, the guy that would hurt the most is probably their best title threat, and that would be Alexander Rossi, who I think, besides Newgarden and Power, is the best driver currently on the circuit.
Let's talk about Dragon Speed for a second. We know they've got Ben Hanley. What do we know about that second car? Are they even going to run a second car this year?
Well, the second driver, I think it's not going to be Colin Brown. I think it's going to be, if they find the thing, I think they're interested in the Australian, that Jacob Allen, who they tested a few weeks ago. But I think we'll see Hanley at St. Petersburg, and we're probably going to see, going with the better experience, him running the Indy 500. But again, I think one thing is whether or not John Dick, the longtime engineer, stays with this team, because I think he was the one that kept them above water and allowed them to make the Indy 500 last year. Without his guiding hand, they could have a problem being competitive at several events this year, or at least the 6 that they plan on participating at.
Dreyer and Reinbold still needs another driver. Pit Paman has a relationship with them, but I don't know. What first of all, Dreyer and Reinbold, they got to fill that other car, or maybe they'll just run one car. Does Pippa Man have a ride this year, even if it's just her normal appearance at the Indianapolis 500?
The thing is, though, would Dreyer and Reinbold pass up on J.R. Hildebrand? And considering that the Salesforce sponsorship they have is because of him, unless there is something that really radically changes here, I just do not see where they would pass up J.R. Hildebrand for Pippa Man at this point. Unfortunately, unless Pippa brings in an offer they can't refuse, I think she is probably going to be without a ride for this year's Indy 500.
What about Carlin?
Well, at this point, we know, I think at this point, even though it hasn't been announced, Philippe Nasser is going to be the driver of the 31 at St. Petersburg. And then the question is, would they run a third car? And I don't know. It wouldn't be the greatest of rides for Pippa. I think she'd have to bite and scratch her way to try to make the field. But maybe it could work out there. Now, there's other drivers, Sergio Sette Camara. There's another F2 driver whose name is escaping me at this point. They talked about testing at Sebring. I don't know if they did or not. But at this point, that may be the only option left. And, of course, that's a big if, because there's no guarantees Carlin will even enter a third car for the Indy 500, because they are, financially stretched and they've not had necessarily the success. So big thing for Trevor Carlin's team in 2020 is getting back on their feet, because they certainly humiliated themselves this past May when they failed to get not only Fernando Alonso in, they didn't get Max Chilton in, or they didn't get Pato O'Ward into the field.
Well, we've talked about all the teams that still need to fill a car, but there's one team that's completely filled up, and it's one of our, we won't say smaller teams, because small is is all relative when you use the word small and large. But all eyes this year is on McLaren and their success. what is your professional opinion of the 2020 success rate? What's a successful season for McLaren? Because all eyes are going to be watching McLaren big time this year.
Well, if one of their drivers claims Rookie of the Year, I'd say that's a success, because when you come in with two rookies like that, that's a lot of pressure, and you cannot necessarily set the bar too high. I'd say right now, if you're looking to the Indianapolis 500 and the Grand Prix, I'd say getting a result for Alonso is their best bet at this point, because, again, unless the rookies are red hot coming out of the box, you can't expect them to carry a team when they have never been in the Indy 500 before. And I'd say that's just asking way too much and expecting way too much from a rookie to expect them to be the number one right out of the box at probably one of the toughest events for a rookie to participate at, and obviously that being the Indy 500.
Been talking with Matthew Embury, our official IndyCar contributor, and joining forces with us to do some NASCAR and IndyCar coverage with Speedway Digest, and Steve Wilson will be joining us here in just a minute. But I don't know if you can join us for the next half hour or not. But let's go ahead and pick back up, because I want to just kind of keep talking about this bubble watch that we were on, and I was on with Mo. Let's talk a little bit about the Big East. Of course, Seton Hall, Villanova, Creighton, Butler, and Marquette are all a shoe-in. But let's talk a little bit about Xavier. The Musketeers lost at Providence on Wednesday, but it doesn't really hurt them that much. Xavier still has a lot, but still has kind of a weird profile. The best thing about their resume is that they really haven't taken on any really bad losses. Xavier on the bubble to get one of those at-large bids.
Very tough sell, but I think the thing that could save Xavier, like we said with this, is because the candidates that are on that cut line have so major flaws among the power conference teams. I mean, that's how a team like, for instance, Northern Iowa is the last team in the field, according to Joe Lunardi at this point, and that's assuming they don't win the Missouri Valley conference title. So you look at the scenarios, a lot of things and dominoes are going to come down over the next several days. But I'd say Xavier, the last thing they can afford to have is an early exit from the A-10 tournament. If they hold their own, at least get to the semifinals of the A-10 tournament, I'd say they have as good a chance as anyone to be able to secure their place in the field.
Let's flip the script here. As we mentioned, Xavier lost to Providence. The Friars won their fifth straight game on Wednesday night, taking care of business again against Xavier. They are now 18-12 on the season, but at this point, Providence should be pretty good. Should feel pretty good about their chances about getting into the NCAA tournament.
Providence is in, but this surprises me. Lunardi has, among his last four buys, Rutgers all of a sudden, which, I mean, Rutgers has a solid resume in my opinion. Now, granted, majority of their wins, like Purdue, have been at home at the rack, but I'm a little bit questionable about saying that they are in any kind of danger of missing the show at this point. So that's a little bit of a head-scratcher on my end that they're that low, because I don't think they should be. But Providence, as on the 8 line, I think they're solidly in. I'm still very surprised that he continues to keep Stephen F. Austin, a team that could have as many as 31 wins this season, not even in any consideration to possibly even getting that large at this point, when they still have that road victory against Duke on their resume. So the fact that they are not being considered, I think, is a little bit of a head-scratcher. And then you talk about a team like some of these other teams getting in, a team like UCLA getting in that large with a very unsightly resume. Now, granted, they've taken advantage of the Pac-12, which has not been exactly strong either. But a team like them getting in that large over some of these other teams does not necessarily look all that great either, though, too, Tom.
Matthew Embury, WSBT up in South Bend, our official IndyCar contributor. Matthew, we're getting ready to merge into some NASCAR here in a second. Are you sticking around for the next half hour, or you got to go?
I can stay for a few more minutes.
Okay. Matthew Embury, we'll be right back with Steve Wilson from Speedway Digest. We're going to get into our NASCAR talk and get into some conversation about Phoenix and what's going on there. My name is Tom Marquis, El Presidente. We'll be right back right here on the Balance Radio Network.